Sounds good.
Here we go. You present. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. So I'm really excited about this project. This is something that it was a lot of fun to learn about as well. And for those of you who don't know me, before the pandemic, I was working very intimately in the music industry throughout New York and Denver. And it was just really exciting to learn history about places that I like to go. I opted not to do Red Rocks only because there is a lot of information on Red Rocks. You can go to the museum at Red Rocks, it's free. But there's not a lot of information on what the history of the venues are in the Denver metro area. And so that's why I opted to dive deeper into that realm. Cool. So I have these mostly in alphabetical order as well. And so the first one, this is one of my favorite places located on Colfax Street. It's the Bluebird Theater. The Bluebird didn't have as much information on it as I'd like for it to, but it was built in 1913 and it was originally named after a prominent Denver grocer, John Thompson. He also opened up the Fillmore, which I'll be speaking about later in the presentation. The theater was renamed in 1922 and it became an important part of the community. It was also initially a movie house and went through various phases over the year. In 1994, Chris Swank and Evan Deichman, I might have mispronounced that name, invested in the Bluebird and reopened it as a live music venue, and it remains today. The theater is laid out in tiers with a balcony looking over the entire space. And in 2006, AEG Live took over the Bluebird Theater and made significant updates. So this one's actually one of my favorite to learn about just because there's a lot to it. The Denver Performing Arts Center is an organization in Denver, Colorado, which provides a showcase for live theater, a nurturing ground for new plays, a preferred stop on the Broadway touring circuit in Denver, in general, acting as class and community and rental facilities. It was founded in 1972. The Denver Center for the Performing Arts is the largest tenant of the Denver Performing Arts Complex, which is a 4-block, 12-acre site containing 10 performance spaces with over 10,000 seats. It's owned and partially operated by the Arts and Venues in Denver. Before I continue, I just thought this was really cool, only because I didn't know that. I knew the Denver Performing Center was here, but I didn't know the caliber of its existence within our community. Continuing onward, both organizations were the vision of Donald Sewell. Finding himself at 14th and Curtis Street in downtown Denver one day and looking at the old auditorium theater and surrounding floor box, Sewell had an idea for a first-class arts complex. Sewell's original vision was much broader and included other entities, which are no longer part of the center. The ground was broken in December 1974. By 1978, the Bocher Concert Hall, the nation's first round concert hall, was completed, along with an 8-story, 1,700 parking space garage. By 1979, the auditorium theater had been renovated. It was completely renovated again in 2005 as well. And there's 2 cabaret spaces that have been added to the theater complex, which opened 4 theaters, which are now known as the Wolf, the Singleton, the Killstrom, and the Jones Theater. And what's really cool, one of those theaters that's in there is the Bocher Concert Hall. Has anybody been there before? It's really pretty in there. So it was the first round symphony hall in the United States. It was built in 1978 as a part of the Denver Symphony Orchestra, the part of the Denver Performing Arts Complex, which is the second largest performing arts complex in the United States next to Lincoln Center in New York, which I thought is awesome. It's originally open to mixed reviews, and due to its size in relation to the community it serves, often the 2,300 seats are not completely filled. Tuned acoustically with the house in mind, they suffer from hot and cold spots when the theater is only partially filled. So the 120,000 square foot structure stands at the west end of the Denver Performing Arts Complex. The exterior has bands of cream and brown bricks, while glass doors surround the entrance. And then Hugh Hardley is the lead architect. Brian Priestman is the Denver Symphony conductor, and members of the symphony board traveled from Europe to look at the concert halls and were most impressed with the round concert halls in the Berlin Philharmonic. Priestman felt the style would create a greater feeling of intimacy for the audience, bringing them closer to the stage. That's the interior. The architects and the acoustician tried to design a hall both acoustically and physically attractive to the audience. The emphasis on design was a configuration and organization rather than an ornate decoration, which was typical of historic theaters. There's high wooden backs in the seats to capture, I'm sorry, I'm like lost track in my notes. There's high wooden backs in the seats to capture the sound and direct it to the listener's ears, which you can see over here. I think that's really cool. And that's also why that there's these lifts within the sections as well, because it's meant to travel the sound because it is a circular space. Also setting up the auditory on a circular space is really hard. So the fact that they can do this is awesome. Here we go. Let me scroll through. And what's crazy about this is in mid-2014, the Denver Post reported that the city of Denver was planning to demolish the concert hall and build an outdoor amphitheater in its place at the Denver Performing Arts Complex. This was in tandem with the planned temporary move at the end of the 2014-2015 concert season to accommodate the $17 million in upgrades of the facility. The city had also considered building a smaller venue owning the attendance of the hall's primary occupant, routinely filling out only half of the existing capacity. The city explored building a venue which would reconfigure seating, allow shows with fewer than 500 attendees to better accommodate the wider varieties of performances and to reach a broader audience. Denver Mayor Hancock appointed the team to begin working on October 1st, 2014 on the future of the concert hall. The debate was both about accessibility as well as the cost. Obviously, they didn't close it yet, which I think is really cool, but these potential plans included fixing up the managing vouchers, a multi-use facility that could host concerts and provide educational space, making the space usable as a concert hall at night and the space full of small classrooms. There was also a discussion, as we said earlier, about adding the outdoor amphitheater. This option is controversial, not only due to demolishing the hall, but also due to competition within Denver's Red Rocks Amphitheater. I'm going to let somebody in the meeting. Jillian's coming in, guys. Cool. And there's also...
Sorry, I accidentally mute you.
Yeah, did it just mute me for a second?
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. I'm sorry about that. How long was I muted for?
Just a second.
Okay, cool. It was just when I was letting in Jillian. Sorry about that. So what's really cool about it potentially being like a multi-faceted space, it would be used for and would have more uses and more purpose. But the only thing that I'm apprehensive about is the fact that this is the second largest concert hall. I love the history in there. I love the aesthetic of the space. I personally just wish that they use this space a little better. I think it would be really awesome to see like non-jazz musicians, non-opera musicians in here as well. Although I love that type of music as well, and I love going to see that music. But how cool would this be to see a rock show with like a 360 panorama? They haven't been using the space in that way, but it would be really sweet to see. But I also do like, they haven't gone through with the renovations yet, but I do like the idea of creating this as a communal educational space as well. So hopefully they can hybridize the two without losing the architectural work in this, because it is beautiful. And we're on the next one. Cervantes. Has everybody been to Cervantes? Yes, no? Okay, so Cervantes, I've been to Cervantes a lot actually. It was an old casino cabaret located on Walton Street, and their history goes back to the Cotton Club days of the 1930s. Jazz greats such as Duke Ellington and Benny Goodman took over the stage when they toured through Denver. Over the years, the casino cabaret has hosted acts such as James Brown, B.B. King, Ray Charles, Tina Turner, and countless others. Cervantes has continued a musical legacy of building a neighborhood ever since the grand opening of January 2003. Cervantes on the other side has hosted thousands of live shows, including performances from Chris Robinson, Derek Trucks, Dr. John, Pretty Lights, Bass Nectar, Nas, Big Boy, Sound Tribe, Sam Bush, members of Phish, Branford Marshalls, and Warren Haynes, to name a few. Cervantes has 2 rooms that offer music simultaneously. And it's interesting because they were both one room when it was the casino cabinet, but then they turned it into 2 for the 2 smaller stages. And they hold about 900 people. This one, Brittany actually sent me an article on it. I wasn't originally going to incorporate it, but it was really cool, so I opted to do so. The Church nightclub has a long, interesting history that started over a century ago. It's now a nightlife sanctuary, pre-COVID, but it was once a holy parish for the community. It's not common for a historic structure like the church to be turned into a nightclub. It kept its original Gothic architecture with the stained glass windows and intricate woodwork for a truly unique atmosphere while on the dance floor. The church was originally called St. Mark's Episcopal Church. It was founded by Reverend John Franklin Spalding in 1889. It was actually the second St. Mark's, replacing the original brick church that stood on 13th Avenue in Broadway and was founded in 1879. Sorry, I get nervous sometimes. I stutter. St. Mark's serves as a community for 86 years. The religious blessing was removed from the church when a third St. Mark's church opened in the Wash Park area, which Tiaja actually went over in her presentation, transferring the building from sacred to non-religious use. The building remained empty for almost 27 years. After its vacancy for over 2 decades, the club Sanctuary opened up in the early 90s. Sanctuary hosted club nights and punk shows. The club kept the old church pews and set up bands at the formal altar. After a few years as Sanctuary, this church of 7 candles, more popularly known as the church, opened on New Year's Eve of 1996. The new club was named after the stained glass artwork behind the formal altar. For the past 20 years, the church has hosted EDM, trance, Latin, goth, and retro nights every weekend. In addition to contributing to Denver's nightlife, the church has also used their space to give back to the community. The church hosted the Children's Hospital Martini Miracle fundraiser for 10 years, as well as the 2008 DNC parties with Flowbots, Everclear, and Moby. Prince also played 2 notorious after-hour shows there in the late 90s when they first opened. The church has been listed one of the top 10 best clubs in America by DJ Magazine. Friday nights are home to Ritual Fridays featuring the world's best DJs and residential DJs, presented by Global Dance. Latin nights are hosted Saturdays, and SIN Sundays features 2 rooms, which are retro, goth, industrial, dark. The church is a unique space that has an expansive range of appeal. The former religious sanctuary is now a signature staple of Denver's nightlife and is home to dancing and worshipers and thrill seekers alike. So next one, this is actually the reason why I decided to do one about the Denver music venues. I don't know if you've heard, but unfortunately El Chapultepec closed. Just really sad. I have a lot of fond memories here. My ex-boyfriend, who I'm still really good friends with, used to host their Sunday night funk nights. And so every Sunday, we all, even when we broke up, I still went. It was a good time. We all used to go to Sunday funk night, and like all of our friends that did pedicab work would come in, and we would just dance. And then after we would go here, we used to go, his grandfather was a pastor at a church, and that's actually where he learned how to play the keys. So we would all go to the church and his church in Aurora and continue our late night jams and set up a little church band and play some really cool funk music. Some of the best memories I've had in Denver. But yeah, let's talk about El Chapultepec now. Opened in 1933 after the repeal of the prohibition, El Chapultepec started life as a Mexican cantina. It still serves traditional Mexican fare like tamales and burritos. Well, not anymore since they closed. And they also have cold beer and drinks since they first opened the doors. They have the oldest original Coors account in the state as well, which I thought was a fun fact. But what really changed the place the day the father, I'm going to restart that sentence. What really changed the place was the day the founder's son-in-law, Jerry Krantz, took it over. Jerry was a fan of jazz and began introducing jazz music into the repertoire shortly after taking the reins. Instead of the typical Mexican-inspired music that constantly played at small saloons, Jerry began booking the occasional piano players and jazz ensembles. And such was life for years. El Chapultepec became known as a local live jazz venue, and the bar became a popular spot for after-hours drinks and entertainment. Jerry never charged a cover. You can come in at any time and simply sit and listen to good music. You didn't even have to buy anything. This is why Jack Kerouac and his crew spent so much time here in 1952. If you guys have ever read On the Road, he actually mentions El Chapultepec in there a lot. If anybody wants a copy of that book, I have it. It's really good. According to Jerry, they'd get high out in the parking lot and then they'd slump in a booth and listen to jazz. They didn't have to buy drinks and sit and listen. Jerry tolerated them for free. Then things started changing for El Chapultepec and for Jerry. After finding out that a jazz clarinet great Buddy DeFranco was playing at the University of Denver, Jerry decided on a whim to invite him over to a session. To Jerry's surprise, he agreed. Somehow, word got out, and as jazz musicians booked the university stage to play, they'd also stop off to Peck to play a set or two. By the time the 1970s were in full, Swing Jerry was lining the walls of his joints with pictures of famous musicians who stepped into his tiny, tiny stage. So we have Doc Severinsen, Wilton Marshall, as well as like Court Baez all played here. And even Bill Clinton played here, which I don't know if you guys know this, Bill Clinton plays saxophone. I saw him live once with the Wailers. I was working an event and it was ridiculous, but it was a lot of fun. Even the chairman of the board, Frank Sinatra, shared a wild evening with Jerry and his friends at El Chapultepec. But it's not so much who played here, it's why they played here. This place is unapologetic. It is a bar. It is a wash pink neon, inside and out, with low dining room style bars and chrome stools. There was linoleum floors, which walls lined with black and white pictures, and a warped pool table, and of course, Mexican food. If it wasn't for the jazz pedigree, we would call this place a dive. When Jerry took this place over, he really had no aspirations for El Chapultepec other than to run and keep it at peace. The jazz was response to being there, and that all the time he would hear the music he should like. So he didn't even want to be there. He turned it into a place he wanted to be, but originally he didn't. But that's only half of what he's known for. To say that Jerry was a hard nose is to put it mildly. Jerry kicked ass, literally. He was, as he reminded us, the only person there most of the time. He was the bartender and the bouncer, and he was very strict on his bouncing rules too. I have a quote from Jerry from an article, and I think it just kind of embodies him. It says, if he hit one more person with a bat, then I'm putting you in jail for a year. And that was what the judge threatened. And then he's like, why? We asked, didn't you find it necessary to hit people upside the head with a baseball bat? Yeah, so he would just kick people out of the bar because he gave, excuse my French, he gave no shits. And he really went in on it. He laid the law down, but it was, as long as you stayed cool and like kept your composure, you could have a great time. And it, up until it closed, it was still one of those types of places too, which I really love. Oh, I hit the wrong way. Okay. So this is actually a fairly new place. The Ellie Colkins Opera House. They just remodeled it. But yeah, well, it's not new, but they just did a remodel on it. When Robert W. Speer was elected mayor of Denver in 1904, he quickly aligned his administration with what became known as the City Beautiful movement. Has anybody heard of the City Beautiful movement? Ish. Yeah, that's something I want to look more into as well. I think it'd be really cool, especially for our group. Maybe the next time I do a presentation, it'll be on that. But yeah, it was essentially a movement that happened in the early 1900s. It's a huge reason why Wash Park developed as well. And it was in hopes of constructing more communal spaces like an auditorium and the buildings that serve us today. So in the 1880s, Denver's already hosted some major conventions, including the American Medical Association, the American Library Association, among others. But the city did not have a proper convention facility. As early as 1887, the Denver Chamber of Commerce began to call for its construction of a civic gathering place that would encourage the convention of businesses along the Front Range. Political infighting and lengthy legal battles surrounding the construction of the building raged on for years. More than 15 sites were considered. Finally, in 1904, Mayor Speer successfully championed a resolution favoring the erection of a Denver auditorium, and on May 16th, The voters approved of a bond of $400,000 to build this facility. The construction, though, on this did not go smoothly. Disputes with the contractors and charges of incompetence flew back and forth. Mayor Spear, though, was not deterred. Despite a work stoppage, Spear presided over the laying cornerstone on September 22nd. The governor, justices of Colorado Supreme Court, city officials, and a crowd of 7,000 watched as the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge Mansions in Stone set place. The cornerstone contained a 1907 coin minted in Denver, information about the auditorium bond issue, and a copy of the day's Denver Republicans and Denver Posts, but not the Rocky Mountain News, which was owned by Spear's political rival. So during Spear's second term in office, the auditorium was still unfinished in 1908, but he insisted on holding a swearing-in ceremony at the building on June 1st, 1908. Workers stopped what they were doing and watched from the overhead steel grinders as 10,000 people attended the ceremony. Denver opened the doors for the auditorium for the city's first and only major political party convention so far on July 7th, 1908. The Democrats nominated William Jennings Bryan for a third bid during the presidency of the convention. The delegates were duly impressed by Denver and the new facility, even though it was still incomplete. The exterior of the auditorium was a classic design created from bricks and terracotta, with large dome cupolas crowning each other. Inside, the Great Hall measured 246 by 145 feet, with exterior corridors providing easy access to all areas. The fully opened hall could seat 12,000 people. The auditorium soon became the heart of Denver civics life, hosting pageants, shrine circuses, policeman balls, flower shows, farm exhibitions, and high school graduations. Boy Scout jamborees and the theatrical and musical performances are just to name a few. During World War I, 700 soldiers were quartered in the building for weeks. Movable walls could divide the space into smaller areas, which I think the Denver Performing Center should do with their space. And the arch was 60 feet wide and 50 feet high. It was built in 3 sections, each section weighing several tons. 7,000 iridescent lights decorated the exterior of the building. Inside, 14 electric sunburst chandeliers illuminated the proceedings. By the 1940s, the auditorium fell onto hard times. It was considered one of Denver's crown jewels and started seeing cramped and outmoded. The city building inspector suggested improvements to meet the fire codes. Still, demands for the space continued, and in 1947, a bond issue was approved that allowed for the construction of the auditorium arena next door to the old facility. The first major remodel of the auditorium occurred during Quiggs-Newton administration. The removable walls were taken down, and a permanent theater that can seat approximately 2,000 people was constructed inside the existing walls. The roof was replaced, and some of the original finishings were removed. About 10 years later, meeting rooms were constructed behind the stage as a supplement to the new convention center built across the street. The auditorium has played a host of virtual who's who's of American entertainers over the year. By mid-century, it functioned as Denver's opera house, hosting and touring opera productions from both coasts. And this is why they had the idea to build the complex at the caliber that they did, because this was getting a lot of foot traffic. In the late 60s, a young producer named Robert Garner came to town and brought Broadway with him. Thousands flocked to the auditorium to see the best Broadway throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s. The auditorium continued to host other events such as ballets, concerts, lectures, meetings, graduations. It made perfect sense when the Denver Performing Arts Complex grew around the beloved Auditorium Theater, which we talked about earlier. By the dawn of the 21st century, the auditorium again was due for renovations. While this building was in use until it hosted its final performances in December 2002, it was apparent that many updates were required in order to continue serving the citizens of Denver. Mayor Wellington Webb appointed a Blue Ribbon Commission to study the renovation of the project. The task force, chaired by Wilma Webb, included Jim Copenhaver, Hugh Grant, Raymond Jones, Jeremy Shamos, and Judy Wolf. The task force recommended that the city completely reconstruct the interior of the building, and in 2001 and 2002, a broad coalition of Denver performing arts leaders began campaigning to support the project. As the construction began, the new administration, led by Mayor John W. Hickenlooper, who is appointed Jack Finlaw as the director of Denver Division Theaters and Arenas. In late 2003, Denver was honored by the extraordinary acts of generosity. The family of Denver businessman George Calkins donated $7 million to the city to finance the auditorium's renovation project. The new venue inside the building was named the Eleanor Newman Calkins, known to the family and friends as Ellie, and Denver's first lady of opera. I thought this was really cool. This one's awesome, actually. So before I get into this, this is really cool to learn about. This used to be a roller skating rink. And so we'll get into it. I was very excited when I found that out. In 1907, the venue opened as Mammoth's roller skating rink, becoming a prominent after-school hangout for the nearby East High schools. After the roller rink closed in the spring of 1910, the building was occupied by an automobile company. During its tenure as a manufacturing plant, the venue produced nearly 500 vehicles, being the first purchased by Titanic survivor Molly Brown. The plant closed in October of 1917. The building remained unoccupied for several years until it was purchased by Irving Jacob and became the city's first recreational center. Known as the Mammoth Garden Roller Club, the center offered ice skating, hockey, basketball, ice polo, boxing, and wrestling. During this time, it also became home for the venues of the Colorado Roller Hockey League. One of the teams was called the Mammoth Garden Dodgers. And a professional basketball team played here before the new construction of the Denver Coliseum. The venue also served as a temporary wedding hall before and during World War II. The household also framed skating vanities during the 1945 to 1946 season. The venue also hosted its first hockey event broadcast at the Armed Forces Radio Service. Every Thursday, the game from the venue was broadcasted by KLM at Lowry Field. It also hosted the U.S. National Indoor Figure and Speed Skating Championships in 1950, 1952, and 1954. In 1960, the venue hosted its first concert, and James Brown sang. As business began moving to the Denver Coliseum, the venue closed and became a warehouse for the Colorado Merchant Company for 5 years, closing in 1967. The building was purchased in 1968 by a concert promoter, Stuart Green, who shortened the name to Mammoth Gardens. The venue was converted from an ice rink to a nightclub. His hopes were to compete with Bill Graham and his Fillmore franchise. Kind of ironic that he bought it. The venue worked closely with Barry Fay to bring national touring acts to the Denver scene. Although only in business for 8 months, the club hosted concerts by the decade's leading artists, including Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, The Who, The Grateful Dead, and Joe Cocker. The most remembered show is performed in April of 1970 by Jethro Tull. During the show, a patient escaped a nearby hospital at St. Luke's Medical Center and entered the kitchen area and began stabbing himself in the chest. Tainted as bad juju, the club closed because of this in October of 1970 and was pushed by city officials to have the venue closed to improve the surrounding neighborhood. The building reopened briefly in 1976 as a farmer's market, simply known as the market. However, this only lasted for 4 months. In 1981, the venue was reopened after Mammoth Gardens Moncur host to be sporting and live music events, while also servicing as a private meeting room and a banquet hall. After 14 months, the doors closed once again due to the dispute among its partners. 4 years later, the venue purchased by Manuel and Magle Fernandez. After some renovations, the venue became the Mammoth Events Center. During its reinvention, the venue became the main site for Denver's Latin music scene and a variation of other touring acts. During its 12-year run, the venues hosted various concerts such as the Beastie Boys, Fishbone, Murphy's Law, Ozzy Osbourne, one of my favorites, Cyndi Lauper, Pantera, who's another one of my favorites, Slayer, Club Novu, DJ Quick, Rick James, Cypress Hill, the Big Audio Dynamite, Jane's Addiction, Fugazi, The Offspring, Sublime, Butthole Surfers, Dream Theater, Blink-182, Oasis, Coldplay, Green Day, as well as many others. I've also been very lucky. I got to see some of my friends play here too recently. And this week, my best friends actually on a flight right now. She's flying in because her husband's playing at Cervantes, which I forgot to say earlier. Cool. It's also hosted various sporting events It's also hosted various sporting events over the years, including the Ultimate Fighting Championship, Pro Wrestling America, and the World Champion Wrestling. The venue was sold by the Fernandezes in February 1999 to Bill Graham, which is really funny because, as I said earlier, this is who he was trying to compete against. So it goes full circle. Later, the entity combined force with Live Nation, and the venue reopened as Fillmore. This was met with controversy around the Colorado audience and luminaries, many of whom felt Denver had ample amounts of music venue. The Magnus Arena, the Ogden Theater, the Paramount Theater, the Music Hall of Lodo, and the Gothic Theater were already claiming fame to Denver's mid-sized concert scene. Due to its many physical changes and uses over the years, some promoters saw the venue as a failure and were not easily persuaded to host a concert at the venue. Promoter Barry Fay, who preferred not to use the venue, stated the unpopular opinion that hell had better connotations than Mammoth. Despite its challenges, the building was heavily renovated between November 1998 and May 1999, relocating the stage, fixing the acoustics, and adding many amenities. The inaugural concert performance was performed by the Trey Anastasio Band on May 19, 1999. The Fillmore has grown to become a prominent force in the Denver music scene. Since its 1999 opening, the auditorium has hosted many concerts by Widespread Panic, NoFX, the Foo Fighters, Bad Religion, Umphrey's McGee, Sound Tribe, Sector 9, Marilyn Manson, Joss Stone, Nelly Furtado, James Blunt, Owl City, Paramore, Ghost. There's been over 1,900 acts, including a visit from President Barack Obama, and altogether attended by 2.7 million patrons. Since 2007, the Fillmore Auditorium has been booked by promoter Eric Pre. The Fillmore annually ranks as America's top 10 grossing attending nightclubs in both Billboard and Pollstar magazine. In 2017, the Fillmore began an ambitious remodel, the first scope of over a decade. Some of its updates included increasing the size of the artist backstage green rooms, showers, furniture, TVs, adding a full-service kitchen that serves the artists and crews nightly. Another big update has been the addition of over 50 men's and women's bathrooms. The changes have come with glowing reviews from the Denver Post, Billboard, Pollstar, and more. The Ogden Theater. The Ogden Theater was opened in 1919 by John Thompson, who ran the Thompson, also Bluebird Theater, which we talked about earlier. The Ogden Theater originally hosted live performances such as weekly organ recitals, dances, lectures, and vaudeville acts, and most notably, the legendary Harry Houdini. By 1937, it had been converted to a movie theater that featured everything from the classics to the avant-garde. It was part of the Fox Theater circuit of movie theaters. After the DOJ issued a disventure of the Exhibition Theater division of Fox, the theater was acquired by the National General Corporation. In 1970, the theater underwent a major remodel that included a new marquee, a complete remodel of the lobby, and an auditorium including a main floor seating and lodge seating in the balcony, the acoustics, and the conversion of the screen to be able to play an anamorphic and flat features. The remodel also included an update to play both optical and 4-track magnetic film soundtracks. In 1977, the theater was acquired by Mann Theaters when it purchased the Nation General Corporation theater business. In 1980, it was a revival house that featured cult movie classics such as screenings of the Rocky Horror Picture Show every Saturday night, which those are a lot of fun if you guys ever have a chance to go to one. Going to a screening for Rocky Horror Picture Show is a lot of fun. The inside and outside of the Ogden Theater have been renovated many times throughout the years, as well as a host of different marquee signs have been used. The flat marquee on the theater that was added during the first major remodel of the 1970s and was updated in 1993. In the late 1980s, ownership of the theaters changed hands numerous times until the theater was closed in 1990. The theater was marked for demolition until Doug Kaufman of the independent live music promoter Nobody in Particular Presents purchased the building in 1992. Kaufman's vision was to turn the Ogden Theater into a premier music venue. The Ogden Theater was reopened in 1993, featuring a wide variety of live performances. The theater found its niche and has become a premier concert venue in Denver, featuring 150 concerts per year. In 2006, it's been released and sold to AEG Live. In the 2002 movie about Schmidt, Jack Nicholson drives by the theater in his motorhome when he pulls into Denver. The hip-hop artist Atmosphere mentions the Ogden Theater in his song National Disgrace. The quote is, "Last thing I remember, I was at the Ogden Theater in the backstage bathroom making out with all three of you." It's kind of, yeah, I don't know. Ophelia's soapbox. I'm going to keep this one brief, only because to me this reads more as a nightclub bar versus a music venue, but it's still prevalent. Ophelia's electric soapbox garnered a lot of conversation when it first opened in Denver. It is the third edition from our city. Justin Cucci, the chef and owner of two other popular restaurants, Linger and Root Down, also owns this. The location's history also adds a certain allure. This was a brothel that originally opened in 1889, and then it was turned into an adult bookstore, and then from there turned into a restaurant. And what's really cool is in all the interior, what I love that Ophelia's did is even though they did do a major remodel on it, it also has the little nuances that you could tell that it was an old brothel, and it has a lot of the history still ingrained into the venue and into the space in itself. So now this is the Oriental Theater. The Oriental Theater is a historic theater located in the Berkeley neighborhood of Denver, Colorado. Since opening in 1927, the venue has hosted numerous functions, both private and public. The venue allows minors and consumers over 21 to function together rather than having to be separated from their ages. Right now, it's being currently used as a live music venue and is registered with the National Register of Historic Places. As said earlier, the Oriental Theater was built in 1927 and originally started off showing movies. In the 1960s, the owner decided to put in new seats and carpets to attract customers, but due to the lack of response, the theater had to close. After 45 years of inactivity, it was purchased in 2005 by Scott Labria. It was turned into a live music venue. Labria was the owner from 2005 until he sold it to Jim Norris in the Three Kings Tavern Entertainment in 2009. In 2011, Scott Labria, Andy Burklaw, and Lara Moore bought back the theater, but the opening was short-lived. They were forced to shut it down for renovations of the building due to the structure was almost falling to the ground during concert goers at the event. In 2012, after much needed fixes and help from investors, the venue reopened. Presently, the theaters host some of Denver's largest events, and local and national acts has its same owners. Yeah, can you imagine just going to a show one day and you're dancing and you feel like a piece of the ceiling on you? Like, I was like, okay, this needs a remodel. Okay. So I also put in, this is my last venue I'm going over, the Paramount, but then I also put in the link of the Paramount history only because they have some of the coolest photos on this site. Built by Temple Buell for the public theaters in 1930, the Paramount Theater instantly surpassed the standards of dozens of theaters that lined up the streets of Denver, and also remained the only local theater of its time to maintain its original dignity and glamour. It is significant not only as an excellent illustration of the Art Deco design and craftsmanship, and a tribute to an architect who made considerable contributions to the Denver region, but as a unique reflection of a broad social and cultural phenomenon that prevailed in the early decades of the 20th century, and Denver as an entire nation. By the mid-1920s, the movie house has become, I'm going to restart that sentence. By the mid-1920s, the movie house had become America's primary social gathering place and amusement center. The theaters for the common man entertained millions in the 20s, as many of their own fantastic splendors and by the fantasy presented on their stages and screens. The Paramount Theater was no exception. On August 29th, 1930, an estimated crowd of 20,000 gathered in the streets of Denver to celebrate the grand opening of the showing of Let's Go Native, rivaling the attendance and the excitement previously generated only by Hollywood premieres. The rave reviews and widespread public awe immediately established the Paramount Theater as the foremost movie house in Denver. The glamorous atmosphere was and is heightened by the original architecture and design elements. The architect Temple Buell, who's done a lot of stuff in Denver, built several important buildings in the region and is accredited for founding that Western style of architecture. Despite its many successes, Buell was known to claim as the Paramount as his finest example of work. The theater is an unrivaled testament to the Art Deco design and craftsmanship of the era. The facade, with precast concrete blocks enhanced by glazed terracotta moldings, offer a striking contrast to the rusticated stone of the surrounding buildings. It also reflects a popular design device of the period: terracotta decorative elements created by the illusion of extra height for the 3-story building. The ornate details above show windows and on the sills of a showcase of the recruitment halls with motifs. And there's leaves, feathers, fiddlehead ferns just engraved everywhere. It's so beautiful. The green tinged and black marble of the street level and above the window give a contrast to the more drama to the exterior elements. The interior represents an excellent example of zigzag Art Deco design, which is the fanciful and ornamental architectural expression popularized in the Jazz phase. This building was also equipped with luxuries consistent with the golden age of film, such as a splendid or ornamented lobby, indirect lighting, a vaulted sunburst ceiling, cut glass chandeliers, Egyptian lights, Italian marbles, and a neon marquee. Exotic and flamboyant decorations, such as Aztec figures, ferns, floral, leaf motifs, sun rays, are consistent inside and outside the building, and are repeated in many minute details, including the stair railings and radiator grills. Originally designed for the silent movies of its time, the Paramount houses a one-of-a-kind Walzer twin console organ designed to produce varied sound effects and accompany it with the picture show. More than 1,600 pipes generate the sound of orchestral and percussion instruments, as well as spatial events such as train whistles, horses' hooves, and pounding surf. Despite the fact that the introduction of sound pictures quickly eliminated the need for the musical accompaniment, the organ remains as one of the largest to have ever been installed in the Rocky Mountain area and is joined by its sister in New York City's Radio City Music Hall as one of the only 2 remaining in the United States. The Paramount Theater was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1980 and was declared a historical landmark by the City of Denver in 1988. Today, historic Paramount Theater remains a vibrant, multi-event facility where Denver Metro residents enjoy a wide variety of entertainment options each year. So I found these pictures so pretty, which is why I wanted to bring you guys here. Let's go through. It was really hard to find a lot of pictures of different. Is this in the way my bar? Okay, cool. I'm the only one that sees the bar then. So this is the entryway. I just thought this was so beautiful, all these photos. Like, look at that beautiful stage in there. There we go. I love the lighting too. Didn't somebody in our group recently get a vintage light? Who was that?
That
We
was
did the
Carolyn.
Are there any updates on that?
She was gonna try and come, but she was running a bit late today, so I think she's still in her
next
class,
time I'll
but-
check in with her on her light because I bet it's really cool. Made me think of her, which is why I incorporated this. All of the lighting on this it's so intricate and just so beautiful, and yeah, we have all of these beautiful details. And what's nice is when you go in the theater, you can tell that every single aspect of it is thought out. Like, every single detail was put there intentionally. Every single detail has a purpose. It adds to the aesthetic. Like, I love this Art Deco style. This is very, like, I don't know if you guys know Alexander Mucha, his Art Nouveau movement. I'll send some of those. It's really cool. Yeah.
They don't make things like they used to.
Right, and this is the organ. I think it's beautiful. Yeah, I love these little paintings too. Love that. I wish I knew more about the history of the art within the Paramount, but I just love the visuals. I can get lost in this theater with just how beautiful it is. It's the organ up close. And what was the most interesting part about this project for me is because I am from New York, and I always knew that the New York and Denver music scenes aligned, but I didn't realize how connected they were. And as someone who has watched their entire home basically be destructed in the last year due to COVID, it's really nice knowing that my new residence and my new place that I call home has so many parallels with where I lived and why I lived living in New York too. And it just really solidified the fact that I do love living in Denver Metro. And so I really enjoyed that about this project. It was a lot of fun to work on. And I also I love these pictures. Does anybody have any questions? Anything to?
The presentation was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a lot more information. I had to condense it. I geeked out. I was really nervous too, so I'm really glad you guys liked it.
Well, and so I just moved here at the end of 2018, so I haven't been anywhere. So this is so cool to see, you know, what spots I need to go to as soon as things open up. So thank you.
When they do and everything can become normal again, you let me know. I have a lot of friends that work in music, and I can gladly bring you wherever you want to go, music-wise. Yeah, the Denver music culture is awesome. There are so many venues here too. There's such great nightlife, and what I like about it is it's all like fairly tame compared to what I'm used to in New York. The fact that it closes at 2, you're like, oh, I could get up and be at work and not die because the show's not done at 3 a.m. But no, I also love the outdoor venues here. I just wanted to focus on the indoor ones and ones that had more of a history and a little more of a little more depth to the development of Denver Metro. And the outdoor ones, unfortunately, don't have that. I mean, Red Rocks does, but that's in Morrison. And a lot of these venues, nobody talks about the history of them.
Let's open up to more questions. Do you guys have any questions, comments?
So Kayla, do you have a favorite venue that you like to see besides the Paramount? We know you love the Paramount. Do you have another favorite?
My favorite was actually El Chapultec.
Yeah.
And then that closed.
Of course.
My favorite my favorite event is Monday Night Jazz Nights. They're orchestrated by Gabe Mervine. He's an awesome guy. He was in the Motet, but he's now doing a solo thing. But it's cool because the same spirit of El Chapultec is there. So like a lot of musicians when they're touring will just stop in on jazz night and you'll see some incredible acts. And there's maybe like 20 people.
Yeah.
What's your favorite venue?
I like that one for sure. I would have to say I really like Ophelia's.
Yeah.
I haven't been to to see music in so long. It's just like, but I've been to most of those places. But I'm gonna have to go to the Oriental and the church. I've made notes to go to those 2 places and see something.
I thought you did your own private concert in your basement.
Yeah, every day. Right? I have a musician husband. He's a drummer and he's very loud. And we met in a band. Like I play bass, and so we really like music. So we've been to most of these places and seen music, but not the Oriental and the church. So I'm gonna have to go to those when this.
The church is more of a nightclub.
Okay.
So just make sure when you go to make sure you're not going to a club night because they get really gross.
Right. This is a great music town. I mean, I know Red Rocks is like, It's Red Rock, right? But I love that you're showing the urban places too. This is a great music town.
Yeah,
really
there's
is.
so many places here, and it's a huge reason why I gravitated towards Denver, because I was able to find working in the music industry before COVID. I was able to find work here fairly easily. And I worked in a couple of the music bars, and I ended up summer 2019 doing event coordination at Red Rocks. That's closed, but hopefully when it comes back, I'll be making good money as a real estate agent and be able to attend concerts again.
So Kayla, I wanted to mention thank you for the El Chapultepec mention there, because that's one of my favorite places too. And I unfortunately haven't had the chance to go in a little while, but I was pretty devastated when I saw that was closing, and it just brought back a lot of memories of sitting in there with a buddy who loved jazz, and we would just, you know, hang out in those old like black vinyl and seats and just listen and hang out. And I'm sad that that's closing, because I thought that was such an authentic place, and I think reflected a lot of what that neighborhood used to be. And now the neighborhood is changing, not I don't know. I mean, it's a really amazing, the change that's happened, but then unfortunately there are other things that go along with that, which is places like that closing a little bit. So I really appreciated that you added a little more color to the history that I even understood of that place. And then I was also wondering, I've been to the Mercury Cafe a few times, and I was wondering if you looked into that one or not, or if you know anything about that. Or
So I looked into the Mercury Cafe a few times. The reason why I didn't incorporate it into my presentation was just because it was more, when I went there, it was more like a coffee bar-esque entertainment space, and I was focusing more on the venue in itself. There's also a few that I couldn't find a lot of history on, that being one of them. Right. I couldn't find a lot of history on the Marquee Theater either, which was kind of a bummer, because I love going there and getting pizza. But just with time constraint of making sure the presentation ran a 30 to 45 minute course and lack of information out there, unfortunately I couldn't include the Mercury Cafe. But have you been before?
Yeah. And again, that's been a little while for me, but because I know that it holds very small music events as well. So I'm not sure what they might, I'm not sure if you could even fit like 600 in there. I'm not sure. I mean, it is pretty small, but I've been there where there was a stage, and they cleared everything out, and it felt like kind of a smaller music venue. So but I know it maybe even served food, so it is kind of this like mix of being a place that you could eat, and it would be a cafe, and then maybe they have some musical acts.
It's a really cool communal space though.
Yeah.
Also, so there was Herman's Hideaway. Has anybody been there?
Yeah. I have, yeah.
That's I know they right before the pandemic, and Powerman 5000 and Adema were playing, and that was like my high school dream come true, because I never saw them in concert. But we couldn't go because I was about to give birth like immediately. So is that a hot venue to go to, or a great place?
Herman's Hideaways is hopping, but a place that I think is even cooler is Herbs Jazz. It kind of has that dingy bar-esque culture to it. It's usually pretty dead. And the nights that I've gone, it's been like it's more of an open jam where you like sign up and everybody can play a song or two. But Herman's Hideaways is a lot of fun as well.
So we had something right by us called Syntax. So it's closed now.
Yeah, I've been there too. That's good. Yeah.
Brittany, I don't know if you were. When did it close? I wonder if you were here.
I haven't heard of it personally, but
it's the Roxy now. Is that right?
Roxy, and I haven't gone. Maybe I went once with Roxy. Yeah, maybe I've been once. But Syntax was amazing. It was so good. It had all this different stuff, and it was small, and it was neighborhoody. Well, some nights it was boom, that kind of thing. This is really fun. It's like a block away. It was so fun. I miss it.
Yeah. I wish I could have gone there. I've never been yet. Well, and it's close. I'll never.
Yeah, but it's Roxy, which might be okay. I just haven't really visited much.
Yeah, I grew up here, so I've been like going to all these places since high school. And the Fillmore, when it was the Mammoth, it was like unrecognizable. I remember going to the Fillmore after I like went away to college and came back, and it like wasn't even the same place. Like, didn't remember the two as the same. It was as gross as it sounded in the description. But I saw like No Doubt there before they were famous, and like Gwen Stefani was just walking around, and yeah, it was a cool place to see like little acts. And then the cars that they built there were the electric cars, the kinds that look like little like Cinderella's carriage kind of electric cars, the Frickle. So it's got a crazy history.
Yeah, it was really cool learning about that too, because I didn't know anything about the Mammoth being the skating rink car facility. It was really cool.
My favorite concert experience was at the Ellie Calkins. I went by myself to see Nico Case, and I was sitting in the very top, and someone came up and was like, "We have tickets for people who are by themselves on the floor. So if you're alone, you can sit in the press row on the floor." So I got to sit like in the second row. It's pretty amazing.
Awesome. That is awesome though.
So yeah, never be afraid to go to a concert by yourself. It could really pay off.
Mm-hmm. That's actually how I've gotten so many opportunities that I had in music, was going to concerts by myself. Like, nobody wanted to go to the music I wanted to go see. When I lived back in the city, and even like through college, and from that, I just met new people and put myself out there, and it was super, super beneficial to do so.